Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
No Springsteen today. Interesting. All of our guests today on this Monday are brought to you by Basant Motors. This November, say no to the GST when purchasing a new to you vehicle from Basant Motors. Learn more at basantmotors.com. As we bring in from TSN Noodles, Jamie McLennan. How are you, sir? Thanks for doing this.
Not too bad. How are you guys doing today?
Great. Very well. Very well. Hey, Jimmy, we were talking about this in our first hour. From what you know, how often does a GM talk to players when they're trying to or thinking about acquiring players from other teams?
More often than you think. Depending, again, I have specific examples, but it's more about depends on your leadership group. Like if your captain's a grizzled vet, 30 years old, and been around the block, or you've got some veteran core that you're talking to or in communication with. A lot of times, if there's a big move to be made or somebody who has familiarity within that room, for example, the player that you're acquiring is best friends or is friends with a guy, there is some communication. Now, it's not a lot, like it's not daily, but I know for a fact, I remember a GM coming to me and he was looking at one of my friends and said, what do you make of it? And would he be open to it? Would he be excited about it? I think there was an extension involved, that type of stuff. And I just said, listen, I think everything's on the table with him. Obviously, talk to his representation. There is an element of tampering that you can't mess with, right? You can't have the back channeling, but certainly you do your research. And every manager who does their research, a lot of times character research factors in. So if you're doing your character research, you talk to people who know that person or know that entity, know the whole situation. So it happens, I think, a little bit more than you think, but not in every scenario, especially if you've got a younger team and maybe it's you don't have that direct kind of contact with your leadership core. But I've heard several instances of it.
Yeah, we bring this up because the word is Canuck players, especially Quinn Hughes, were really happy when the Canucks signed Kiefer Sherwood from Nashville in the offseason. How much did you know, and he's playing top six and does not look out of place, how much did you know about Kiefer Sherwood before this season, Jamie?
A little bit, not as much as I think now in Vancouver and everyone in Canada. It's funny when somebody goes play south of the border and they're a really good player, but they're not front and center on the 7 Canadian teams. They're not household names. But I know I have a friend of a friend type of thing, as we all do in the hockey business, because it's such a small family. But a friend of a friend that knows the Sherwood family and speaks highly of him. I've never met him personally, again, but it's more about what he can bring to the table. What stands out for me, and in watching the Canucks play, is this guy will not turn down a hit, which is unbelievable. And what it does is you know exactly what you're going to get from him every night. So when you have a predictable player, I think that's really important for the coach, because the coach goes, okay, I know exactly what that guy's going to bring tonight, and he might drag the rest of my team or the rest of his line into a war that night, where maybe if they're a bit sleepy, all of a sudden he drags you into it. So when you have a programmable / predictable player, I think it's really good from a coaching staff perspective and from a team perspective. They know exactly what he's going to bring every night. So I'm happy for him that he's getting kind of like we'll call it the fanfare or the recognition he deserves, because he's a hell of a player. And you're right, he doesn't look out of place in that top six, and certainly had a hell of a night against Ottawa on Saturday night. He was unbelievable. He was everywhere.
Hey, Jamie, Thatcher Demko's close. He's on the road trip. We don't know if he's going to play on the trip. Maybe first game back December 6th against Columbus. A lot of people are saying the first game isn't the big deal. It's about his durability when he comes back. What are you looking for with Demko here in the next week and a half?
Okay, so when I watch him, my biggest thing is comfort, because when you're moving, especially, again, you guys know exactly the injury. Everyone, the whole world knows the injury. It's more about, how is he moving side to side? How is he getting up? Is there any, thought process? So once you get through and we'll call it is 100% healthy, The next thing you need is to not think about it as a player. So it becomes habit just to move side to side and get up and do all the things you do as a goaltender without thinking, geez, you know what, I'm coming off a long injury. I'm going to be very extra ginger on that side if I'm pushing off. Any sign of that's would be concerning for me. If you're watching him and he moves fluent, he gets up and down fluent, he doesn't look like he's laboring or any type. And then the next thing is reacting to plays. Because once you get into a game, as a goaltender, you can't start thinking. It's about reaction and habits. So for me, that's what I'm looking for. And all of that, let's couple all of that. Then you need to look comfortable. Like it's been a minute since he's been starting games every night. So now it might take him a little bit to settle in. Now, the first couple games, he might be fantastic just on adrenaline and sheer skill and talent. You guys know what I think of him. I think he's, as good as there is. But it's about settling in and not having that fatigue. And they've got to be mindful of that because they've got this grade A asset, and you don't want to force feed too much on him early on that he takes a step back or his conditioning and his habits aren't there. So there's work ahead. Even when he gets 100% and is ready to play, there's still lots of work to get him back into a comfort zone where he's playing every night or every second night, and he looks like the Thatcher Demko that we've seen 18 months ago type of thing.
Jamie, Saturday, Brady Tkachuk, some antics there late in the game with Vancouver. Travis Green defended him this morning. He said, some people saying he's too emotional. Travis said he's not too emotional and he wouldn't change him. What do you think of Tkachuk? And he gets heated sometimes during games.
He does, and you can see the frustration. Here's a guy who's 25, been in the league 6-7 years now, and they're trying to make the playoffs. They're in an 0-4-1 stretch.
Yep.
The one thing that Brady, a lot like his father, a lot like his brother, they play an emotional game, and they make no apologies for it. He's the type of guy you want on your team and you don't want to play against because he plays for keeps out there. Now, that being said, I think there's a line, and I think this is where probably Travis can help as a former player, as a guy who played in third, fourth line. I mean, Greeny was a goal scorer in junior, but then at the NHL level, he was more of a second, third line guy. But I think Greeny will be able to pass down some wisdom to him as far as, listen, play with emotion, but controlled emotion. Because, listen, I saw the other night, the wires cross and he's looking for anybody to get a chunk of. I've seen it before. Again, they're frustrated. Vancouver frustrated them that night. It just seemed like everything Vancouver touched either found the back of the net or it was an advantageous play for them because they created their own luck. I really liked what the Canucks did the other night. On the swing side, people will say, well, that's an immature thought process for the captain that's immaturity coming. To me, there's a fine line between that and that emotional level. And you got to find that balance. And it comes with the one thing that people hadn't paid attention to with Ottawa. It was just a couple games ago that Brady had his first fight. So it wasn't like, I think it was game 15, 16. It wasn't, everyone thinks this guy fights every night and he attacks people and does all of that. There had been a measure to his success or lack of physicality. People said he had a baby in the offseason, so being a father, maybe that's given him perspective. I don't know. I just think there was a couple games ago was his first fight, and it was a reaction to what he believed was a bad hit on Stützle. So he'll always stand up for his teammates. But, I'll be honest, the other night kind of reverted back to a couple years ago, Brady, where it was like, I'm pissed. I want to take a piece of somebody, and that's what's going to happen because we're at 4-1. Now, they score a couple quick ones and make it interesting, but it didn't matter. They lost the game, and Brady showed frustration, and I think the biggest part is he took that penalty, and Nick Cousins took that other penalty, and that was a 5-on-3, and that kind of killed the game right there if they were going to try for a comeback. So I think there's a fine line between having that emotion and having it in check as a mature athlete. But, he has that balance, and I've seen a lot better of him this year, but he did revert back to what we've seen before last game against Vancouver.
Hey, Jamie, we're out of time here. Thanks so much for this. We'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.